Everyone argues about it, but which martial art actually works best in MMA? Let's rank them all and figure out which style truly dominates the cage. Back in the early days of the UFC, this question wasn't philosophical, it was literal. The whole point of the first UFC tournaments was to find out which martial art was superior. You had sumo wrestlers facing kickboxers, karate masters going up against boxers. And nobody really knew what would happen. And then a skinny Brazilian and a GI walked in and changed everything. Royce Gracie used Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to tap out guys twice his size. He didn't throw punches and he didn't even look athletic. But he choked his way to victory, and suddenly, the martial arts world had an answer. BJJ ruled the ground. But that was 30 years ago. MMA has evolved, fighters cross-train. The game is faster, smarter, and way more brutal, and no one style is enough anymore. But some are definitely better than others as a base. So let's break it all down, from worst to best. This one's going to hurt some people. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu isn't just a martial art, it's a skill. And the reason the UFC even exists. In the early days, it was unstoppable. Royce Gracie walked into a cage full of bigger, stronger, more dangerous fighters and choked them out with ease. Guys had no idea how to deal with the ground game. It was like introducing a new language no one could understand. Jiu-Jitsu was the cheat code. If you knew it, you had the power to end fights without throwing a single punch. But here's the problem. Everyone knows the code today. And that changes everything. Modern fighters grow up drilling arm bars and triangle escapes. Submission defense is baked into every training camp. You don't have to be a black belt, you just have to know enough not to get caught. And that's where pure BJJ starts to fall apart as a base in today's MMA. Let's talk about some examples. Charles Oliveira is probably the best BJJ practitioner we've ever seen in MMA. But what made him championship material wasn't just his submissions, it was the forward pressure and his striking. Now moving on to an older fighter. Demian Maia was a grappling wizard, but against elite wrestlers or strong strikers who stayed upright, he was helpless. He needed one thing to work with, which was the takedowns. When that failed, so did the ground game. Brian Ortega has a deadly guard, but he took a beating trying to pull it off. Volkanovski picked him apart and Max Holloway gave him a striking lesson. Yes, Brian's jiu-jitsu is dangerous, but his base alone couldn't carry him. So what's the problem? Firstly, BJJ doesn't start until you're on the ground. That might sound obvious, but in MMA, you need the power to dictate where the fight takes place. If you're a jiu-jitsu guy and your wrestling sucks, you're hoping your opponent just chooses to go to the ground. Fighters like Islam Makhachev and Khabib can choose to grapple because they've got the wrestling to make it happen. But if you're pulling guard or butt scooting in 2025, you're not winning rounds. You're losing respect. Secondly, the stand-up game is a huge hole. BJJ fighters aren't trained to strike. They don't know how to manage distance, control tempo, or defend against high-level boxing. So when they're forced to stand, which is most of the time in MMA, they get pieced up. And once you're hurt on the feet, good luck setting up a clean takedown. Judges reward damage, not close calls. BJJ thrives on control and patience, but MMA isn't scored like a jiu-jitsu match. Holding someone in guard and threatening submissions doesn't score points unless something actually lands. And if the person on top is elbowing your face into the canvas, you're losing that round. Full stop. Advanced submissions don't land like they used to. Everyone knows the setups for arm bars, triangles, and heel hooks. But here's the truth. BJJ is still critical. It's not dead, it's just evolved. It's no longer a complete martial art in MMA. It's a component. On part of the formula. It's like having airbags in a car. You might never use them, but if you don't have them when you need them, it's over. Now let's talk about one of the most fundamental martial art for striking. Boxing is the most refined striking system on the planet. Footwork, head movement, and combinations. Boxing doesn't just teach you how to throw punches. It teaches you how to build a fight. And when it's executed well in MMA, it looks like art. Some of the most dangerous and entertaining fighters in MMA have boxing roots. Nick and Nate Diaz turned pressure boxing into a weapon. They wear you down until you make a mistake, then they drown you. Another one is Sean O'Malley. Sean isn't just flashy, he's calculated. He blends clean boxing range with crazy precision. And now one of the best boxers in the UFC. Petr Yan. Petr Yan is the definition of controlled violence. He marches forward like a machine. High guard up and chin down. His footwork is flawless and his timing lethal. It's pressure boxing with elite patience. And it breaks people. Boxing in MMA works, but only when it's adapted. Because here's the truth, and most boxing fans don't want to hear it. Boxing by itself is not enough. Reason number one is that it's limited to the hands. There are no kicks, no knees, no elbows, and no meaningful clinch work in boxing. In MMA, that's a massive hole. You're facing opponents who will chew up your lead leg with calf kicks, who will clinch and knee your ribs, and people who will feint a jab and shoot for your hips. A pure boxer isn't trained for that kind of fighting. Secondly, the boxing stance doesn't translate well. Boxers use a narrow bladed stance, great for defending punches, terrible for defending kicks or takedowns. MMA fighters exploit that. Leg kicks slam into the lead leg over and over again. You don't even need to outstrike a boxer, just take their balance and their weapons disappear. The threat of takedowns breaks rhythm. Boxing is about rhythm, pace, and patterns, but MMA doesn't let you stay in rhythm. You start thinking, is he going to shoot? Should I sprawl? Can I even throw this jab without getting double-legged? And the second you hesitate, your boxing isn't boxing anymore, it's survival. Boxers don't train defensive grappling. It sounds obvious, but it's a killer. You can be a Golden Gloves champion, but if you've never drilled underhooks, sprawls, or wall walks, you're getting mauled. MMA isn't fought in a ring, it's fought in a cage, and that cage becomes your worst enemy when someone pins you against it and takes you down. That's why elite boxers who transition to MMA without wrestling get exposed. Their hands mean nothing if they're stuck on their back. So, is boxing doomed in MMA? Absolutely not. In fact, when adapted properly, it becomes one of the most powerful weapons a fighter can have. Look at Alex Pereira. He's not a boxer, but his hands are sharp, and he uses boxing principles. Look at Max Holloway. He blends boxing range, cardio, and pressure like a jazz musician with gloves. These fighters aren't boxers by sport, but their boxing in MMA is top tier. So, in conclusion, boxing works when it's not alone. But if you bring pure boxing into MMA without adjusting, you're cooked. Now we're stepping into the deep part of MMA, where things get violent and terrifying. Muay Thai and kickboxing aren't just martial arts. They are war machines inside and outside the ring. When these styles enter the cage, they bring decades of technique sharpened for one purpose: damage. Muay Thai is the art of 8 limbs. Fists, elbows, knees, and shins used in perfect harmony. A good Muay Thai fighter doesn't just throw strikes. They dissect their opponents piece by piece, brutalizing leg kicks and ripping into the body. Kickboxing is like Muay Thai's flashier cousin, but is equally dangerous. So how do these arts translate into MMA? If they are used correctly, they are deadly. Let's take a look at some proof. Israel Adesanya, one of the flashiest strikers the UFC has ever seen. Before he ever stepped into a UFC cage, he was a kickboxer. His control of distance, use of feints, and his use of striking turned him into one of the most untouchable middleweights in history. And now moving on to his nightmare, Alex Pereira. As a former Glory kickboxing champion, Pereira's striking is top-notch. His left hook is deadly and his leg kicks shuts down his opponents. Moving on to Edson Barboza, also known as the Leg Destroyer. The man has highlight reels filled with spinning wheel kicks, liver shots, and flying knees. His kicks are so fast and powerful, and even made elite fighters afraid to close the distance. These fighters don't just strike. They control time and space. Every jab and every leg kick is a chess move that sets up the checkmate. But this isn't kickboxing or Muay Thai, this is MMA. And in MMA, everyone shoots eventually. That's where the danger begins, as for the strikers. Muay Thai fighters stand tall to generate power and absorb kicks. But that upright posture leaves their hips exposed. Wrestlers love that. A single leg or blast double can come straight under the base and send them flying. Many strikers come from backgrounds where grappling is either illegal or heavily restricted. Against even mid-tier wrestlers, that's a problem. But in my opinion, kickboxers and Muay Thai fighters tend to adapt to MMA better than pure boxers. And here's why. Muay Thai fighters live in the clinch. While it's a different style than MMA clinching, the familiarity with body control helps them learn to defend takedowns faster. Muay Thai and kickboxers also have a bigger set of tools with elbows, knees, and front kicks. They give strikers more ways to create space and discourage wrestlers from closing in. For example, Israel Adesanya, who came into the UFC with almost no ground game, but developed elite takedown defense and cage awareness. And then Alex Pereira, who had holes exposed early. But in just a few fights, he showed rapid improvement sprawling, scrambling, and even reversing positions. But here's the truth. If a Muay Thai fighter or kickboxing-based fighter is coachable, athletic, and humble enough to evolve, they can become some of the scariest athletes in the sport. Now let's be honest, this shouldn't surprise anyone. Wrestling isn't just the best base for MMA, it's the foundation and the blueprint behind the sport. You can be a sniper-level striker, but if someone can put you on your back at will, None of that matters. At its core, wrestling is about control. And in MMA, control is everything. Wrestlers don't play the opponent's game, they play their own game. If you want to strike, they'll drag you down. If you want to rest, they'll push your back to the cage and make you work for every breath, and if you can't stop it, you don't get to compete. The proof is literally in the champions. Let's look at the names that defined dominance. Firstly, Khabib. Once he got on top, it was over. His pressure didn't just beat opponents, it broke them. Another man that destroyed his opponents is Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier, an Olympic-level wrestler who could throw around heavyweights like they were lightweights. We also have guys like Islam Makhachev and John Jones. And it's not just the past. Wrestling's future is just as dangerous. Even Bo Nickel is dominating his opponents with raw wrestling, before his strikings even has fully developed. So what makes wrestling so dominant? It dictates where the fight goes. Wherever a wrestler wants the fight to go, that's where it happens. Wrestling also forces opponents into survival mode. Elite strikers become hesitant, and every opponent has to think defensively first. It also wears you down. Now let's talk about the evolution of wrestling in MMA. Here's where it gets interesting. Wrestling by itself isn't enough anymore. MMA has evolved, and the top wrestlers evolved with it. People like Khabib, Gaethje, and Usman added ground and pound and submissions that overwhelmed opponents. Modern wrestlers aren't just takedown machines, they're hybrid threats. If you're standing, they'll box. If you shoot, they'll sprawl. And if you hesitate, they'll drag you into deep water and never let go. So we all know that wrestling is the most dominating base for MMA, but here are some honorable mentions. Firstly, Judo, which has gorgeous throws and slick transitions, but harder to apply in MMA without the GI, but it's still very effective when adapted properly. And then Sambo, the Russian mix of wrestling, judo, and submissions. So after everything we've broken down, what do you think is the best martial art base for MMA? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if you like this breakdown, check out the next video where we rank the worst rivalries in UFC history. See you there.